Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SNEED-CAST. Today we're going to be talking about attracting the younger generations to manufacturing and packaging careers. I'm your host Alexa. I'm here with our VP of Sales and Marketing Ken, and we have a very special guest today. We have Jake Hall, better known as the Manufacturing Millennial. Hello, Jake. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, everyone.
Absolutely, thank you. So, quick introduction for our guest here for the viewers. Jake Hall is widely known across the industry, at least definitely through trade shows and social media. Like Alexa introduced him, the Manufacturing Millennial, a huge following on LinkedIn. Manufacturing career that spans almost 2 decades across various companies related to manufacturing, automation, etc. BSA in Product Design Manufacturing Engineering from Grand Valley State, and a minor in Biomedical Engineering. And the Manufacturing Millennial since 2020, a LinkedIn top manufacturing voice with over 87,000 followers and over 150 million video views of all the wonderful stuff that you share. And now a well-known keynote speaker, industry advocate. One thing I couldn't find, do you have any of your own podcasts, Jake, that you wanted to promote or anything? I know you're featured on a lot. I didn't know if you had your own.
I don't have one per se myself, but I'll give a couple shout out ones that I'm, a guest on frequently. One is Manufacturing Happy Hour that Chris Lukey, he's the host for the podcast, but I get the awesome opportunity to co-host there pretty often during the trade show season and events. And then the other one that we have is The Maintainers. So it's a podcast focused on the floor maintenance and manufacturing that I'm a co-host for as well.
Oh, neat. Yeah, a lot of our main customer contacts are usually maintenance managers or maintenance engineers that are responsible for keeping the equipment going out on the production floor. Really neat.
Yeah, I think the whole thing for me started just as a kid, being put in clubs and organizations like US First Robotics was a big thing, FRC. Playing Lego a lot as a kid, I think, was one of those things that inspires every young person, that they like building and designing and making things. When I was in high school, I had my first opportunity to work for a manufacturing automation company when I was 15, 16 years old. And I worked as a broom boy, a shop kid, where I swept a lot of the floors, cleaned a lot of manual mills and equipment. But for me, it was a great opportunity and experience for me to see what custom automation and robotics looked like. So that kind of propelled me into the career of going to college, getting an engineering degree, and that's really what took off my my career, my passion.
Really good. And then I have another question. I have is really as a marketing person, and I love following just branding, marketing stories, etc. And just from a self-branding perspective, what gave you the idea? How did you get going with the Manufacturing Millennial? How did that get started? What were your original goals behind it? And really, could you have ever imagined that it would have led to where it's led to over the last, 2020 is when you start, so 4 years strong now?
Yeah, I never imagined or intended to set out to be in a position I am today. I think it kind of just happened a little bit by chance and then capitalizing on an opportunity. So there's 2 parts to it. One is when I was still working for an automation distribution, selling automated components, I went to a annual meeting event, and during there they talked about how do you future-proof your business in manufacturing. One of them was talking about how do you get the next generation ready. So I thought it was pretty funny that they were talking about that at a trade show, yet when I was sitting there, I was the only millennial there at the time. It would have been in 2019, so I've been like 29 years old, and during that time, it was one of those things, well, geez, there's not a lot of millennials in manufacturing that they're talked about. I'll be the Manufacturing Millennial. So that's kind of how the name was established. It really didn't kick off to me where I started doing more content online and social media and on LinkedIn until the pandemic happened, when we were all told to work from home, this idea of flattening the curve. So we're going to, everyone's going to stay isolated. And I was in outside sales, so I couldn't go visit a lot of my customers, a lot of my clients. So I just started connecting with them on LinkedIn and then posting content around new videos and products and trying to make engaging content that wasn't just, hey, posting the latest product sell sheet on LinkedIn and saying, hey, that's my social media post for the day. I try to make really engaging stuff. So I did that. And then after a while, it was just one of those things where more people started following me, people outside the products that I specifically talked about. And then I started highlighting more about just my general passion for manufacturing and automation and robotics and getting this next generation excited about, for me, what millennials at the time and now our future generation of Gen Zs, and how our industry needs to change through its culture, through its the way it engages in its community, how it adopts technology, and the general purpose of moving domestic manufacturing forward. And there's a lot that we still need to do in the industry to make that happen.
No, absolutely. I tell you, you're one of our favorite follows in the company. Several people here, out not just marketing, but even on the sales side, we all follow you. When you post a cool little video, you did one recent, how a sprinkle's made, how our Lego's made. Yeah. I grew up, date myself, I'm an elder millennial, so to speak. But I grew up watching Discovery channels, how it's made. After school, I'd come home, do homework, and I'd have how it's made on, and how CDs are made or how paint's made, it's just, to me, it's like a throwback to those, a much more consolidated, usually like 1 or 2 minute clips, but they're just fascinating. I love them.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and the whole idea is how can we make our industry more exciting to talk about. I think a lot of times, manufacturing's viewed as an industry where it's just dark, dirty, dull, dangerous. And, it's one of those things where, if you didn't make it somewhere else, you can fall back into manufacturing. Oh,
no, absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
It should be one of those things where it's exciting. There's a lot of leading technology and innovation. And at the end of the day, everything that we consume and we use every day is manufactured. And I think it just goes to show and highlight how important this industry is to make everyone else's lives, possible.
Absolutely. And what a great segue into our topic, right? So we wanted, it's something it's like a little pet topic of mine, just personally, is attracting the younger generations into the industry, manufacturing, consumer packaged goods. Everything that you're talking about is hitting on those buttons. And we'll get to some of my core issues further down, but to kind of set that stage of the conversation, you kind of did it great already, but to kind of continue along, why is it so important, right? Especially now where we're at in the industry in terms of what we're looking at, the average age of the industry, right? Like, why is it so important to get these younger generations, the younger millennials, as well as then behind them, Gen Z, we got to get them excited or motivated to get in this industry. But there are some concerns that kind of lead into that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's multiple reasons why I think we need to focus it. One is we do have an aging workforce in manufacturing. Right now in manufacturing, we have somewhere around 12 to 13 million people working in manufacturing in the United States right now. You go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that number was closer to 18 or 19 million. So, we have a workforce in size that's shrinking in manufacturing, but at the same time, we have a production output that's growing. So there's a balance that we're going to need between bringing in a young generation to fulfill the needed jobs that are in manufacturing to keep things moving forward. We have hit in my opinion, we've hit our limit on what we can export internationally and produce. Our limit has been reached there. Now we need to start figuring out how we can manufacture things more domestically and nearshoring. You're partnering with countries like Mexico and Canada with here in North America. But we need to find better ways to stay competitive. When you look at U.S. manufacturing as a whole, it's like a $2.4 to $2.5 trillion industry for GDP every year in the United States. And when you put that in perspective, that would be like the 7th largest country in the world. Just U.S. manufacturing would be, if you were to compare that to all the other countries' global, national GDPs. It's incredible. And when you look at manufacturing, has always been one of the telling tales of how the rest of the economy is going to go. If manufacturing isn't producing, we're not making products, we're not making components, we're not exporting, the rest of the economy just is not going to do the same. And so I would argue that manufacturing has been the greatest stability and growth opportunity for here in America, for it give us the competitive advantage that we need to stay, a leading country in the world in terms of economic power, in terms of influence. Manufacturing is the backbone for that. And that's one thing that I don't want to see us lose, is by we stop manufacturing and then we begin to rely on other countries to provide the daily needs that we knew. And a great example of that would have been during the pandemic, when we realized that 95% of our personal protective equipment, our masks, our, incubators, all the products that we use for the medical industry, we imported. And it went to show how much of a risk we were when we rely on other countries to provide those products and real necessities, right? I'm not talking about a toy or a trinket or a plastic part that we go in and buy at Target, but true needed infrastructural components and products that we need to keep our lives moving forward. We need to make sure we're manufacturing here.
And another one too, right? During the pandemic or shortly thereafter was the whole microchip issue too. I know that got hit pretty hard by the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping the CHIP Act moves things forward and we begin to bring some more of those, very intricate chips manufacturing here, because right now we can see, a lot of cases manufacturing is the central component to a lot of global conflict. Look what's happening in Taiwan. With that whole thing, right? Between the conflict between the United States and China, focused on the chip manufacturing that's happening in Taiwan. Manufacturing is a political topic that moves countries' boundaries. It's massive.
Now, there's kind of you had posted about this recently, and it kind of, I try to phrase my question or my thought correctly here, based on what you were just saying. Regarding, I feel like there may have been, you mentioned one of your recent posts about back in the 70s, there was a shift away from dual education paths, right? And this is one of my big pet peeves is where we are in this country in terms of a college for all focus that you called it. And I think that maybe that kind of ties 70s, right, is really when the massive push for outsourcing and going overseas with manufacturing. I feel like that maybe those two are hinged together at the hip, in terms of, oh yeah, let's push all these blue collar jobs overseas and then only focus on white collar, pushing people into colleges and stuff, because we don't need people in blue collar jobs anymore. And maybe that's just me making a very bold kind of causation correlation statement, but I feel like there's definitely some connection there between those two.
Yeah, I mean, and there wasn't just one thing that made this happen, right? It was multiple different decisions that were made that made a massive, drive away from, the back floor manufacturing. One of them was, when we look at my parents' generation, the Gen X generation, a lot of them saw a massive career growth opportunity when they went and they got a 4-year degree, because the 4-year degree was not the traditional thing. So they knew that, hey, if their colleagues got 4-year degrees, they were most likely to be successful in whatever business avenue they took. So then they just said they took that exact same mindset and then they pushed it on their next generation, their kids' generations, the millennials and Gen Zs, and said the only way you will be successful is to get a 4-year degree. So then all of a sudden we saw that colleges and universities were saying, hey, 4-year degree is the way to be successful. So then our K through 12 education changed to make sure that the way that 12 years of school when you were a kid was focused on getting you ready for a 4-year degree rather than getting you ready for life, in my opinion. And I think that's the big focus. When I remember when I graduated from high school in 2008. And I was looking at a bunch of universities and stuff. I was looking at Michigan State, Purdue. I ended up choosing on Grand Valley, and I'm very proud that I did, because they have a phenomenal engineering program. But the community colleges were all focused on not getting you ready for a career. They said, come and spend your money here for electives to then go and get a 4-year degree. So even the community colleges weren't even focused on, getting their 2-year degrees. They were focused on just getting all the gen eds out to go to a 4-year degree. All of the high schools and a lot of states were graded on their success by how many of their kids went to go get 4-year degrees. And I think the biggest thing that we're facing is 4-year degrees aren't bad. Bachelor degrees aren't a bad thing to get. I encourage it if it's in a lot of cases the right industry. If we're going out there and we're encouraging kids to get 4-year degrees, and in my opinion, non-STEM related fields, they're not hireable. And yes, there will be the circumstances that they will be hireable. But for the general consensus across the board, when you look at the fact that most kids graduating from a bachelor's degree, they either went there for 4 to 6 years. In fact, like the average 4-year bachelor degree is now taking over 5 years to complete, and they're graduating somewhere between $30,000 to $50,000 of student debt, and then their entry level position graduating is something like $38,000 to $42,000 a year. Something seems off.
Yeah, math doesn't add up.
The math doesn't add up. So in my opinion, society has set so many of this young generation, millennials and Gen Zs, up to fail. That's where the issues take place. So where do we begin to fix all this, right? That's the doom and gloom, that's the issues that we're facing. I think there's a few different avenues that we're doing. One is manufacturing has always been there, and manufacturing in many cases has always set up phenomenal co-ops and apprenticeships and paid to get educated while you get paid to work programs. It's just manufacturing, in my opinion, has done a horrible job highlighting what that looks like. You look at what's happening in Germany and their educational program, where many students, or actually over 50% of the population in Germany, will go and get a partnership or an apprenticeship program through companies that are there, where with the United States, it's less than 1% or like 2% of people will go and actually approach through an apprenticeship program when they're graduating. I think the resources are there. It's just society has shunned people away and saying, don't graduate from high school and work in manufacturing. That's where the dark, as I said earlier, the dark, dirty, dull, dangerous, where the dumb people go who can't make it.
Exactly. That connotation is
a society issue that I have a frustration with is the educational system can go and encourage young students and young people to go and get large federal loans and loans that they can take out to put themselves massively in debt, and there's zero accountability to the educational program to make sure that they're successful at the end of their graduate. Because for them, their whole idea of in a lot of cases is a 4-year degree program is come in, pay us somewhere between 30, 40, 50, even, upwards of $100,000 to go get a 4-year degree. They got paid. They don't care anymore. And yes, there are circumstances where certain programs and certain schools do a phenomenal job to make sure you're taken care of. But I'm talking about the general consensus of education here in the United States. They're just here to collect money. It's a business for them.
100%.
And I think at the end of the day, that's where we failed. And the one thing is, we're seeing a change now. When you look at ever since coming out of 2020, 2019, the enrollment into education has been dramatically decreasing, right? More and more people are there's more and more people deciding not to go to college when they graduate high school, and to go into other programs such as apprenticeships or 2-year degrees, or going into the workforce and saying, you know what, graduating with massive amounts of debt isn't going to set me up for life.
Or another thing I think sometimes is the immediate push to, when you're 18 years old, know what kind of career path you want to go down. Oh, I definitely know for a fact that I want to go into engineering. Let me go commit to this $50,000 debt and go get an engineering degree, only to find out I'm not an engineering type person, right? And so I think that, and you mentioned Germany, but also other, in Europe, it's a lot more acceptable to, once you're done with your primary education in whether it's high school level or that range, right, is to take that 1 or 2 years off to say, you know what, let me go out and get a job in the world. And maybe it's not a great, permanent career job, but in order to get out in the world and kind of find myself or find who you are, and then determine what, in Denmark, my family originates from. I have a lot of cousins and people I know in Denmark. They don't start going to college until their mid to late 20s. because they're not necessarily sure which direction they want to go in. And then also on that European model too is that they still have the two-prong approach. It's not until they start at a much earlier age. You mentioned earlier about how we're focused on primary education is just to get people ready for college, and that's what the entire curriculum is centered around, as opposed to once you get to be around 14 or 15, let's start exposing students. Jimmy and Johnny may be like that straight A, Harvard-bound chemist or whatever, but Jimmy over here, maybe he's better suited to work with his hands. Let's let him start exploring that at a younger age, and then he can start being introduced, like you said, to trade programs or apprenticeships, et cetera, et cetera. So in that regard, that there's definitely, I feel like, some things that from an American point of view, we can kind of take some influence or some models or ideas from Europe and start, using those to try to push those younger generations.
Absolutely. And I think that was the big thing as well, when you take away a lot of opportunities for young kids while they're still in high school to learn what different professions exist of, right? There's no longer the tech programs in school that there once was. There was no longer the shop programs that there once was. And so we focus so hard on reaching these numbers within schools that teachers get so much pressure that they can't focus on all the other opportunities that, in my opinion, create more success for students' lives, right? We're so focused on a kid getting 4 years of English where we don't give them an opportunity to learn how to balance a checkbook and understand what interest rates do on credit cards and how to go and apply for loans properly, or how to fix your brakes on your car so you can do it for $80 instead of spending a car repair person $600. And it's those things where we were focused so high at achieving this level up here that we missed this complete block down here, and I think it's hurt a lot of people.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, if I can chime in here.
Of course.
I'm part of Gen Z. I graduated back in 2018. I was going to say, throughout my 4 years in high school, the focus was definitely like, okay, finishing not just high school, but also like your associates. And then from there, the traditional path was like, okay, going to a 4-year university. All of the career fairs that we would attend were definitely like 4-year degree based. I don't remember ever encountering any kind of like trade school, any kind of manufacturing or packaging career, I guess, opportunities. It was always just the traditional, like, in order to be successful, you have to go to a 4-year university. And now that I'm in this industry, it's like, no, there's definitely plenty of avenues. I actually advocate now, because I think that like within my career, within marketing, you can definitely learn a lot of it, like online, like YouTube has so many courses. There's so many free resources out there. So I actually advocate against it. I'm just like, there's plenty of careers that you can learn online instead of having to spend so much money going to a 4-year university. But again, like, I wish that we would have had more resources and we would have learned a little bit more about these different avenues, just because there is so much success and there is so much need for them.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a phenomenal point right there, right? We as millennials and Gen Zs have the internet now, and we have the ability to learn so many skills that you don't need to go and pay a university to do anymore. I mean, you can look at most universities and colleges now have a lot of their classes online now. You can go and you can learn how to program without ever going to go get a 4-year degree and be very, very marketable and very and have plenty of opportunities to hire if you can learn just how to program. And you just watch YouTube videos, you go on Discord, you go on forums. There's so many ways that you can be successful and other ways to learn education. There's no longer this ceiling that you had to climb through to be able to get an education and be able to learn things these days. It's so open source now where you can go online and if individuals have the motivation to teach themselves and to learn, they can find success in many new routes besides just the traditional 4-year degree.
No, absolutely. I want to kind of touch in a little bit or ask you, in terms of, we've talked a little bit about this earlier when we introduced you. You do a lot of keynote speaking now. I know you go to a lot of events, both domestically and I think also sometimes over in Europe as well. Just kind of your general, with your conversations within the industry, talking to whether it's executives or even mid-level, plant managers and whatnot, kind of what the overall, attitude is in the industry, where they, are they feeling like doom and gloom, like what are we going to do? Is, of course, I think robotics and automation is a big part of this, like shrinking less people interested. All right, we'll replace the jobs with robotics and automation. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but I just kind of wanted to hear from you what you're hearing within the industry and kind of what effects kind of are being seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be shifts in the way we solve problems, right? That's why technology exists. That's why innovation happens. We make things differently. We are seeing more and more automation, robotics being used. In fact, when you look at China is the largest integrator of industrial robots in the world. It would take the United States, Germany, Japan, and South Korea to match the amount of industrial robots that China is putting in annually. And it goes to show where automation is at the end of the day the largest denominator for moving manufacturing forward. And I think what's important for us to realize as we go there is change is going to happen. And yes, we might not have the same amount of people who are working in manufacturing now as what we had 10 years ago. But what we still will need is one thing. We'll need the jobs where people can manage this new technology and integrate it and make sure it's running on the manufacturing floor. But at the same time, we're still going to need many skilled trade jobs that can't be automated. And that's the other thing that we highlight as well is, while we still need robots and, people who can manage AI and robotics automation, we still need electricians. We still need machinists. We still need plumbers. We still need HVAC technicians. There's a whole other route of the skilled trades world that isn't going to be automated, right? We still need this. And for so long, what in my opinion, society viewed down on has now become one of the most lucrative career opportunities for young people, where they can go out there and they can say, I could become a plumber, get an apprenticeship, work as a journeyman, get my certifications that I need, go and start my own business. I can make 6 figures a year at 22 years old, and
be your own boss.
And I know dozens of them. I've talked to so many people who work in the skilled trades area that are making more money than engineers because
I have a friend who's a CNC machinist, and he doesn't have a 4-year degree, and he makes more than a lot of people I know. So
it goes
absolutely.
back to one of those things is you don't have to go to get a 4-year degree to be successful. There's so many routes. And unfortunately, I think between society and guidance counselors and parents doing this, and then, of course, in my opinion, the bad influence of social media, where social media only projects what the best things are of people's lives, and going out there and say, oh, look at this and look how great this person is, when they're not showcasing what reality is. And it's funny for me with as a person who now is living as being an advocate for the industry and what some people call an influencer. It's not as from a perspective of general influencing that you see, like a lot of Instagram or TikTok people. A lot of it isn't real in a lot of cases, and I think it gives a false narrative of what our next generation of Gen Zs should be and what they should go after for. There should be no shame in going and getting a apprenticeship degree, working in the skilled trades, making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, and having a very welcome, stable, comfortable life, and not chasing this glamorous, LA-based yacht club thing, which I think is hurting a lot of people. What reality is.
Oh, I agree. It's a matter of bringing people down from the clouds a little bit and seeing what the real world actually looks like or feels like. But back to, and also with the robots and the automation, kind of to tag onto that point you made. Somebody's still got to build those robots, and somebody's still got to maintain those robots. And automation. I've worked within the consumer packaged goods industry now for 15 years, and no matter how much automation you have, conveyors, pick and pack machines, they all need to be maintained, and they don't run 24/7. And eventually, they're going to go down and have a hydraulic leak or have something or other. So there's still, like you said, there's still going to be a need for being able to operate those machines and being able to code them and everything else and change them. So all very good stuff. What do you think that ultimately? How do you? And we can take this one at a time here. But what do we have to do to how can we make them more interesting? I think you're doing a great job, but how do we get more? You mentioned social media can definitely have a negative side, right? But you're here utilizing the tool and doing everything you can to show the positive impact, the positive side, and bring about that positive message. So how do we create more of that? How do we create more buzz and excitement around the industry?
Yeah, I think the first thing that many companies need to realize is when they want to, workforce is a big challenge for many companies. And I think where they need to start is realizing that a lot of their workforce is going to be local. And if they're not engaged locally in their community, within their local high schools and K through 12 and secondary education programs, or their local vocational schools or universities or colleges, that's where they need to start. And so while it's great to grow more followers on LinkedIn for those companies, it's more important to be impactful in your community. And so I think a lot of manufacturers need to start there to make sure that they have a proper workforce that's being ready to be trained, that can be excited to bring new innovation and technology into their industry. Because in a lot of cases, older generations don't want change, and new generations want change. They want technology. They want to be impactful. They want to make a difference. And so if you're able to attract a generation into your industry, into your company, that's going to bring innovation forward and move your company forward, that's where you start. And so in-person's one. The other part is doing a better job understanding how people like to purchase and consume content these days. While spreadsheets are great, while like sell sheets are great and one pagers that have a bunch of technical importance is huge, I think going out there and creating content that's going to get people's attentions, that's going to make a recognizable brand name for yourself, is going to make you more successful. So it's that balance of, in this case, for example, having a podcast that you guys are doing, but also going out there and showing how your product or your solutions or what the company is doing directly impacts those people, and saying, why is it important to make sure that this technology is used on your floor? Why is it important? How is it making your life easier? What is the problems that you are facing, and how are we going to help you solve those problems? And communicate that through a way that's fun, it's engaging, it's relatable. People a lot of times turn to social media as a way to check out mentally on a lot of the problems that they're facing. If you could be a avenue of fun in a professional space, it's going to make you a lot more successful.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point. Another thing too, and it kind of ties into my next question, because you mentioned this earlier regarding junior colleges and 2-year. We have several here in the Houston area, and you brought up a really good point. It definitely seems like they're all run as prep schools. It's very much their focus is come here. Oh, you can't afford university, save some money, get your core stuff out of the way here, and then we'll transfer you into a program. As opposed to, although they do have applied, they have trade schools within there, and they have, technical skills programs, but they do it seems at least very much like there's very little done to promote engagement with those or promote them as something to consider, where it's more, it's almost like the student or the individual has to seek them out on their own as an option, as opposed to a counselor saying, why don't you consider, you're struggling with, math, or you're struggling with English, have you considered, doing something with your hands or more hands-on career? So do you have any thoughts on anything other than maybe what's the obvious, but in terms of how we can, how these local community colleges, like you said, be local. The local community colleges are as local as it gets, right?
So I think one of the biggest changes, when you look at why young generations are encouraged to go to a 4-year degree rather than one, it's a lot because of their parents and their guidance counselors. And so we need to do a better job reaching the parents of these industries and saying, listen, you hear the stories about all these students graduating with massive amounts of debt. Is that something that you want your kid to also be facing? And, if not, encourage them to say, listen, this manufacturer here is going to pay for your kid right when they graduate high school. They're going to give them a job, but they're also going to set them up through an apprenticeship program to go get certifications and associate's degrees at this, community college is partnered with us as a manufacturer. So your kid, when they're 20 years old, is going to have a 2-year degree, is going to have 2 years of work experience, and is going to be debt-free. That sounds pretty attractive when you look at it and saying, hey, a 20-year-old has this, this, and this, and saying, what do you see now success as versus your kid's 32 years old and still living at your house because they can't go and afford rent because they also have to pay a $450 per month student loan bill.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's one of those things where, those are circumstances that I'm pulling out. Not every circumstance is like that way, but across the board, I think we need to create a better understanding of what actual reality is for this next generation and how we can make sure that they're successful and they're well paid for.
And I think also